I'm going to call this meeting to order. I'm going to ask the gentleman at the end, Dan, to lead us in pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. I want to make sure that we have a quorum. We do have a quorum. I'm going to ask the board members, beginning with Dan, to introduce themselves.
I'm Dan Wilbeck from Morris Island.
Lori Rice from Grand Island. Courtney Snellings from Morris Island.
I'm Amy Heibel from Harpswell.
Christine Donovan Hall from Morris Island. I'm Margaret McIntyre, the interim town planner. And this is Judy Colby George, our GIS consultant.
Okay. I have a couple of things that I just want to begin with, but first of all, I want to thank you all for coming here tonight. We are doing our due diligence as by giving us this evening and showing up to speak your piece. So I want to thank you for having the civic commitment to show up. You might get what you want, you might not, we might not, but the point is that we're here and we're having a dialogue, and that's what this is all about. The other thing I want to say is our town staff are extremely diligent. They are great staff, and they're here morning, noon, and night. They work really hard, and we're lucky to have them. Our staff lives in town, their kids go to school in local schools, and so we need to treat them with respect. So I'm going to ask whether you disagree or agree with whatever the proposals say about your property, that you treat the staff with respect. Thank you. So last June, just by way of background, and I'm not going to talk too much, but last June, we adopted, after much discussion, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA's, new flood insurance maps. Those flood insurance maps were based on more accurate data. The last time that those maps had been updated was, I think, something around 40 years ago. And so things have changed. We have more accurate information. We debated in this room about whether we should adopt the ordinance or not, but in order to protect property owners' flood insurance, we moved ahead and worked also on some fishermen's issues, which we're still working on with regard to some of the regulations that went along with those flood maps. So why update them? Why bother? We're updating them to protect property owners ultimately, because things, as we all know now, can happen that we aren't prepared for. And last year was a prime example. And so better information and good information helps prevent problems. And if you prevent a problem, then you solve the problem. So the intention, even if it may seem otherwise, is really to help property owners protect themselves. That said, property owners are property owners, and you have certain rights and responsibilities as property owners, which I'm sure you're here to talk about tonight. Most of the changes only affect land within 75 feet of the high water mark from the shore. So for the record, there are about 400 properties that have been affected by these new proposed zoning maps. And they are proposed, they're not a fact yet. We will vote on whether to accept these recommendations at town meeting. So that's why we're here tonight, as I said before. So in addition to more accurately reflecting the information on the physical maps, we are also going to more accurately describe geographic boundaries of the Shoreland Zoning Map. And so the actual ordinance of the language, the actual language of the ordinance needs to be also updated. Most of these changes are really small. They're definitions, and they're a reordering, they're sort of an administrative reordering of how things are written in the zoning ordinance. There aren't any really significant changes to that would affect property owners that the map doesn't reflect. So let me just give you an example. The actual language makes corrections, as I said, to definitions. So for example, the definition of the highest annual tide, which runs throughout the ordinance, is now proposed to be replaced by the highest astronomical tide. And so because that highest annual tide reads throughout the ordinance, we have to go through the entire ordinance and find places to make those changes. Other ordinance changes are, as I said, they are either clarifying or organizational. Margaret can speak more appropriately to those. So with that, we want to hear from you, and if you'd like to, if you don't have your comments in writing, we encourage you to send them to us. And then depending upon how many comments we have, we will probably strongly consider meeting with people to go over in more detail what their property, how their property is affected. That's our due diligence to you as citizens of the town. So we want to hear from you, we want to have a dialogue and an exchange. Margaret doesn't have 400 hours to meet with every single property owner. But if folks really do have significant questions, then we will do that. So with that, we'll turn it over.
Did you have anything left to say? Did I say it all?
You said most of it, yeah. So a lot of the language changes, like Amy said, the goal is to bring them more into compliance with the DEP shoreline zoning guidelines. So that's where the change from highest annual tide to highest astronomical tide came from. And then the other change is that instead of it being the flood zone and RP, resource protection, previously the only affected areas were in the velocity zone. Now the ordinance will read all properties in the 100-year floodplain. That's really the only policy change, but that came straight from the DEP as well.
Okay. Judy, do you want to just run through some of the, yeah, do you want to run through some of the map changes, how the mapping is done? Yeah, why don't you do that? Because I think people might appreciate it.
Sure. So the new floodplain data was created using the LiDAR data, which is a form of collecting data from remotely, but it gives a much better surface model, and so that's how the new floodplain maps were created. So we also use that same data to create new slope data. So we were able to create the 20% slopes and find where those are consistent, contiguous in town using this. So now we're using the same data for slopes as we're using for the floodplains. So those are the two layers that I use to make edits to the map. And And then, what we did is overlay those two layers with your existing shoreline zoning, and then, identify where things were developed and, left those in shoreline residential, and then cut in where there were steep slopes and floodplain into the areas, where there was not existing residential development. And so, I made my best attempt to do that as consistently as possible. We looked for places where there was more than 500 feet between houses, and if there was that much distance, then we added in that RP in between those two places. And then, if there wasn't, then we kept it out and left it as shoreline residential, and we went all along the shore doing that. I think that's the biggest part of what we did. There are a few places on the inland wetlands that we did change to RP. That was a discussion that I had with the previous planner. All the other inland wetlands were RP. There were 3 places where they were not RP, and he said to change those to RP, and so I did. I leave that to the planning board to decide if you want to do that or not. I don't do all of it to the planning board. I just did the mapping that I was supposed to do. But that is what I did, as best as I could, as consistently as possible, in all cases. There are a few places where the shoreline zoning was extended beyond the existing shoreline zoning boundaries, and anytime that happened, it was always because the 100-year floodplain expanded beyond the shoreline zoning, and what the rules say is that the shoreline zoning has to extend as far as the 100-year floodplain extends. So there's places where if you look at the maps, you'll notice that it's not just the 250 feet back, but it'll extend a little further back, and that is and every time that happens, it's because the floodplain lies underneath that. So.
One other thing, just to make it clear, I didn't already, and Judy and Margaret can clarify this even more. The proposed changes are based on more accurate data that we have now. They are not based on future climate change. They're not guesswork. They're based on what is on the ground now. So we're not making any prognostications. We all know from last winter, we hope that never happens again, but we get surprised by Mother Nature. But so what we'll see, and what you see on the maps are based on current information, not anything projected. So, did any board members have anything they'd like to do? Okay, so feel free to ask any board member any question that you want, but let's hear from you.
Good evening. I'm Sam Alexander, North Harpswell. In fact, I'm Amy's neighbor in the form of Sunset Hill Farm LLC. We are a family LLC. Consists of my brother and I as the managers, and our 6 combined children as members also. Our aim in forming that 12 years ago was to protect the farm, keep it in existence for another 300 years. We have been residents of Harpswell, my family, for over 300 years. We are right in this area where you folks want to make a section of it RP. We take a crop of hay off those fields every year. And we've done that my whole lifetime and my ancestors' lifetime. The areas that are designated steep slopes, which was the ostensible reason from the codes office for putting this in RP. Don't get me wrong, I'm all in favor of conservation, but this is a bit ridiculous, and I'll explain why. There are steep slopes there, certainly. They are wooded. We never cut the wood off those. The only thing we do is clean up the trees. We have left, over all the years, a 40 or 50-foot wide strip of trees on the top of the bank. Mean high water comes up to the foot of a bald-faced rock cliff, in our case, 80 feet high. Water is inaccessible from the land, and the land is inaccessible from the water. It would take an experienced rock climber to get up there. Having said that, the same characteristics exist all the way up along that shore from Wilson's Cove up to at least the Phillips property, which is north of ours, well north. The height of the rock face varies from 15 to 90 feet high. Ours is some of the highest. But there are actually on Hybels and Wheelwright, I don't know who owns the patch, maybe Sarah Huntington, steeper slopes on their property than there are on ours. And having said that, further up the hill from our shoreline is the highest point on Harpswell Map. And I don't say that lightly because there are geodetic survey markers, bronze markers in the ledge at the very top of the hill. Put there in the 1930s by the WPA. Another thing I would like to discuss about this is the fact that in the 1970s, when the state mandated shoreland zoning to the towns, Richard Barton owned the old Elijah Kellogg property, and he put that property in commercial fishing. I note that you have not changed that designation. And I think that's perhaps politically motivated, but I won't go any further than that. That land of the Bartons is used by us. There is a road right of way that my great-grandfather received from Elijah Kellogg. And so we use it, the Supones use it. There is no access to that shore from the Barton property. And that's another reason why. That land in that little cove area that the Bartons own is marine clay. 4 or 5 times in my lifetime, storms and extreme high tides have undercut the bank, and the land has swamped. Last time it did that was 6 or 8 years ago, and it swamped 8 or 10 feet. Another reason that should not be in commercial fishing is there is a stream that comes down through it and empties out across the beach. The rock face shoreline resumes on the upper half of the Barton's property and the Phillips property, and even further up, although it's not as high. So we have about 1.5 miles of those conditions. But I see that you are considering putting RP zone on our land, but nobody else's. Now I'll contrast the two situations. You've left Barton's property in commercial fishing when it shouldn't be there in the first place. By the way, he was a town attorney in the 1970s. Not that I would presume that he had anything to do with it ending up in commercial fishing. He even admitted that to me and said, I wanted a commercial fishing sand because the rules are much looser. I can locate a house within 25 feet of the shore. I can build it right on the sideline if I want. Later on, he had a proposal to establish a marina there, which ran into many obstacles, not the least of which was his lack of access to the shore from his own property. It would be a major engineering project to put a road, a bridge, and build a wharf and a marine-related business there. No problem with the upper part of his property. That's 15 and 20 foot high rock face. And those are about all the marine issues I wish to address. But I attended a meeting of the Comprehensive Plan Committee last year at the town office. the committee and their consultants, and the two consultants wanted to put our property in shoreland business, which is ridiculous on the face of it. There's no public access. It's, as I said, an 80-foot cliff. There's no road there. Neither the Alexanders nor the Sapones will ever grant a right-of-way to anybody to come in there to use their property anyway. So that's the situation, and we object to it being put in RP for those reasons. They're not simply whims or anything like that. We have noted that we are the only ones being put in RP. That Barton's commercial fishing zone, which is in a butter of our property, and would have to use our property if there were a right-of-way to it, remains in commercial fishing. That's just not right. I've been around the block a few times as far as zoning is concerned. I was chairman of the Zoning Board of Appeals for 15 years ago, and I know about these things. But both of these instances, the Bart property and your proposal, are spot zoning, which you understand is completely illegal. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. It's a pleasure to see you. Yeah, it's a pleasure to see you, Sam. Okay. Thank you, Sam. Anybody else want to comment? We've got a lot of folks here. Sam will be in touch with you.
Thank you, Chair Heigl and honorable members of the Planning Board. My name is Scott Cowker. I'm a property owner at the very end of Long Reach Lane, just behind the school here on Great Island. I present the following testimony, and you've got copies up there. My concerns regarding the proposed amendments to the Shoreland Zoning Map, the definitions, and the Shoreland Zoning Ordinance being considered at tonight's public hearing. I fully understand the need to update the town's zoning maps regarding updated floodplains and areas of steep slopes, but there is a proposed zoning change that significantly affects and devalues my property, as well as my neighbors at the end of Long Beach Lane. Exhibit A, which is attached to my testimony, shows the existing zoning of shoreland residential. Specifically, there's a zone identified on the town's maps as zone 403.00, which exists around a freshwater wetland. If you go to Exhibit B, it shows a closer view showing my property and that of my neighbor, Catherine Chatterjee. Both our properties are currently fully mapped as either shoreline residential or what remains is the freshwater wetland. I understand this zoning, and I understand the Planning Board not make any changes to the shoreline residential zone 403.00. The proposed zoning, which is shown in Exhibit C, changes this existing shoreline residential zone to a resource protection zone, and even takes a portion of the existing shoreline residential zone next to that, maybe number 405, and includes this in the new proposed resource protection zone. I understand and can live with the requirements of the existing shoreline residential zone. It's on the property today. So I know how that affects my property. But changing the majority of my property to resource protection severely limits the future use of my property and is taking a significant value away from me. The wetland that is surrounded by this shoreline residential zone as it exists today, zone 403, is shown as 11.4 acres on the current zoning maps. I believe that's incorrect, and that the wetland is actually less than 10 acres, because if you get back there and walk around, there are significant inclusions of uplands in that mapped wetland area. If, in fact, this wetland is under 10 acres, then I understand that it could be excluded from shoreline zoning altogether. And I would ask that perhaps the town consider a closer look at that wetland to see if it could be excluded from the shoreline zoning ordinance. Also, I might add that myself and Mrs. Chatterjee are both willing to perhaps spend some money surveying that wetland and bring some information forward. That's the best way to go about that. But also, please note in Exhibit D, which is an excerpt from Harpswell's FEMA flood maps, the updated ones that you mentioned, shows that this wetland is not in any flood zone. So it really shouldn't even be part of the proposed zoning changes being discussed tonight. It's an isolated freshwater wetland that's elevated and making a big change from the shoreline residential zone around it to resource protection. It's a major impact on all of us down at the end of the road. So I ask that either the planning board do one of two things. Either eliminate the existing shoreline residential zone 403 based on the wetland area that it surrounds being less than 10 acres. That would be the preferred change. Or leaving the existing shoreline residential zone alone and not converting it to resource protection zone. That would be the minimum change I would ask. There are existing homes, outbuildings, roads, driveways, lawns, people's houses in this proposed resource protection zone. The proposed changes would severely limit, if not outright deny, the ability to make reasonable improvements at our homes and our properties at the end of Long Beach Lane. I just ask that the planning board take my request into consideration. And I thank you for your time this evening as well.
Anybody have any comments? Thank you, Mr. Cower.
Thank you.
I think we would like to meet with you as well, and would probably take you up along with Mrs. Chatterjee on your offer to do some due diligence on your own, and we'd also be willing to ask the DEP to come down and meet on the property and have their input as well. So thank you. Does everybody just want to get home and watch TV? Come on, step up to the plate.
Thank you.
You can raise it if you want.
My name is John Jones. I'm here representing.
Could you restate your name, please? I'm sorry.
Yeah, my name is John Jones. I'm here representing 222 Long Beach Lane, which is the property that Scott's. My mother lives down there and has for some time now. Captain Chatterjee. I just want to mention that I concur with everything that Scott said in terms of the concerns about rezoning that particular area, and I'm sure there's lots of considerations for how does this rezoning impact people's ability to enhance or change or do anything to their current property. And I would add, I think everybody here is on the same page with respect to protecting the land, conserving it, for the flora and fauna that is unique to this area. I mean, it's really quite amazing. I think that the question remains is the impact upon, as I mentioned, making improvements or changes necessary or otherwise to one's property, and making sure that access is still available. One of the unique aspects of property we're talking about and considering is that part of the access to it is currently in the province of the state of Maine through the Austin Carey Law, Department of Public Lands. So it adds another level of confusion there. And one of the concerns is what, if any, improvements could be done to roads that are in a new zoning area. I don't have an answer to that. It's just something to consider downstream of that. So I do want to thank everyone for your time and your energy in this zoning venture. I'm assuming that the observance of the new floodplain maps from FEMA benefit in some way, economic or otherwise. I don't know, but that's my assumption. And I commend you on bringing the town up to speed with that designation. So thank you for your time, and I look forward to meeting with Scott and whoever from the planning board. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. You're taking the long way around.
Or something like that. My name is Elaine Marsh-Farrower, and
I'm not catching your names, I'm sorry, I'm going deaf. It's Elaine?
Elaine, H-E-L-E-N-E.
Okay,
Marsh-Farrower.
okay.
And the property that I'm talking about is, and I'm gonna just honestly tell you, this got dropped kind of in my lap yesterday. And I was probably the only person who came yesterday to find out it wasn't yesterday, it's today. So I don't have a lot of background in this, and picked up, just didn't have time to do the homework in the one day that I found out about it. So we have a lot on Birch Island, Conduct Cove on Birch Island, and it is the only one when you look at the lots, and so this probably will require a short conversation at another time, but I wanted to put it on your radar. In the Birch Island South community, we are the last lot in the small lots, and I don't have the lot number, I'm sorry, but I don't have it on here. And we are the only one that is in the resource protection. Maybe it was always protected, and I just don't know because I don't know enough about it. But we seem to be the only one, and I made a comment to my husband about it, and he was like, well, there is, quite a block there, and, we wouldn't want to build too close, but we're at that point where we might want to put a small structure on it. So I need to understand how this is going to affect our ability to put a structure. And it's not quite 2 acres, and nobody, the person to one side of us, it's a huge parcel of land. And people to the other side, it is a much smaller kind of, we're all parceled off almost the same. So I just really will have to have some idea if this is how this is going to affect us, and why does it end right at the end of our property? Why are we the only one in that whole line that would have this zoning? So.
Okay, super, we hear you. You know what I'd like to do is create a sign-up list for everyone that's spoken. We have one, yeah, and so, but we don't know who wants to come in and meet with the town staff. And, so make sure that you get Margaret your name and your contact information before you leave, and then we will be in touch with you.
Okay.
I can answer your question to a certain extent, though.
Okay.
The language regarding resource protection is in the ordinance currently. So currently it says, except areas which are developed, areas which are shoreland business, or areas which are commercial fishing, that only leaves shoreland residential. So essentially all areas that are shoreland residential that meet these standards, and I think there's 6 different qualifiers, 6 different areas that you can be in, puts that portion of your property in resource protection. That language exists in our ordinance. So it says areas of steep slopes, 20% or greater, that go for 2 or more sustained acres. That's not exact, but you get the point. And the other is areas in the mapped FEMA floodplain that are in shoreline residential that are not currently developed. So there, without seeing your lot, there could be a couple different reasons
But most of it is because the property beside you is probably developed and yours is not. And in that language exists now, all we're doing is putting it on the map. So there is no change. If you came to us and we knew it was a really steep slope, we would say, is this steep slope resource protection? Does it go more than 2 acres? And then we would go through the same process. We're just doing it globally for the whole town, as opposed to doing it on a lot by lot basis when you came in to build. But it sounds like you wouldn't build on this 20% slope anyways. So, and that's kind of what we found, and that's what I assume. Sam and I had this conversation in the code's office also. Like, he said it's really steep, I wouldn't build on it. Well, it's already zoned resource protection. We just didn't put it on the map.
Right, and I think because I've just been kind of like thrown into this, I need to know a little bit more about all of this a little bit. I mean, I know the property, but it is just a piece of property right now with the intention is not going to build on it.
Yeah.
So just protecting what rights we have to be able to build. No, I don't think that we would, build on that section. No intention, obviously, for that. But just to make sure that if you're putting it on the map, and I'm putting myself on the map as somebody that I need to know more about this. So those are questions that if we can look at our piece of property and just get those answered, then of course, then I can go back to the other two on this and with my mother and brother and say, okay, can't build in this area.
Right. And then if you did come in for a building permit, we would say, where are the steep slopes here? That would be resource protection. Just show us where it is on your property, and you can build anywhere else within the setbacks.
So, and it does say on here the 2 acres. This is a long property, and it's like 1.8.
It's 2 acres of 20% or more slopes.
Right.
Yeah. So it's not 2 acres on your property, it's 2 acres of contiguous, and most of the time in Harpswell, that means contiguous along the shoreline. And so when I create the steep slopes, I just pull out all the greater than 20% and greater slopes, merge all of that together, and then find all the polygons that are greater than 2 acres. So they just have to extend along the shoreline, and they can extend along the shoreline even if they're in shoreline residential, so you won't see it, but it's there, and there's a map that shows where, and we can show you where that steep slope is, but if it shows up on a property, it means that there was a polygon that was greater than 2 acres. Does that make sense?
Yes. Except on the map, it's only on our property. So if it does extend through the neighbors, I mean, someone's gonna look at that and say, that doesn't affect us, that only affects you guys. And then they're gonna go to you and you say, no, but it really does affect you guys because you're in that polygon, but it's not represented on the map that way. Am I reading that right or not?
There would have been a reason that your neighbors disqualified from the resource protection, typically because their property is developed.
Okay.
Yeah, it could be that it's developed or it's commercial fishing or shoreline business.
None of the above. So developed, some of them are developed,
right,
and some of them aren't.
That's
why, I don't want to take up their time listening to this.
No, but I think it's good for everybody to understand how we came to this process and how, if you have resource protection on your lot, how you might move forward. Yeah. And what the permitting process might look like.
So I will just make sure you have my contact.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Happy to follow up with you.
So not to muddy the waters or anything here, but part of what this new mapping is doing is it's giving the folks in codes and planning information that they didn't have before in mapped form. So a person's property might still have been in resource protection, it just wasn't mapped that way. And so now having the maps gives Margaret and the codes office the opportunity to go to a map, even if it's not 500% accurate, to go and say,
That's something that we need to watch for. And then we'll do a site visit. Did I mistake anything there? No, never mind. I'm pretty sure I'm right, but let's move on and hear from you. Yes.
Oh, yeah, I did. I am remembering what you said, yes, that the maps are gonna be more accurate. There was a great example, the planning board was dealing with a new subdivision on Bayview Road. The person bought the property with the idea of subdividing it, only to get into the process, very far into this process of trying to subdivide this property for income, I assume, and only to find out that the majority of this property qualified for resource protection because of the steep slopes. And so that will kind of help us understand each property before anybody gets to the point of trying to develop it.
And that is really important, because that way the applicant doesn't waste their time and money. And then the code office comes out and does a site visit and says, whoa, wait a minute. You actually need to do something more here. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Stacy Stanley on Great Island. And my husband and I recently added a dwelling unit to our property, so that it's fully limited. And yet, in the new map, it's shown resource protection covers that, and in fact extends very close in our dining room. And if it's something there, it shouldn't be. Is that my understanding from what was said before? So that could be tested?
Yes, your property probably wasn't picked up when we did our mapping last year.
Right.
And so that
it wasn't built then.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So that's where the difference is.
Okay, so that, and I'm not sure, I know when we went to get our permit, we had to have a survey done because we were close to resource protection. And yet our survey didn't match the map, and we all went with the survey. Is that still going to be the case? Okay. Because in a way, it's sort of like a big highlighter on the map, and it can't possibly be as accurate as the survey. So ours could be relooked at, and I just wanted to be sure, because we have a neighbor who is probably about 2 inches away from our house, with the property line, and yet with our new dwelling, I'm not so sure we have that polygon. If I understand. I'm not quite sure I fully understand the polygon thing, but if I do, we'd appreciate it if we look at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Lori's asking me to just reiterate again, and she's absolutely right. These maps are not legal, end-all decisions. They're very much better than what we did have, and they will preempt mistakes, many mistakes, but they give us extremely good guidance. But on-site measurements are where the rubber hits the road.
Hi, I'm Kathy Goffey, here on behalf of my father, Glenn Gott, and our family. We live in the old primary board schoolhouse on the Cundy's Harbor Road for decades and have deep roots in all of the Harpswell communities. I appreciate the opportunity to speak tonight because the proposed zoning changes have serious implications for us and many others in town. We prepared a brief statement outlining the key concerns, and I'd like to take a moment to share them with you. This is all information, by the way, that I've been able to glean in a very short period of time, and I'll do the best that I can. To provide some background, during this contentious land use debates culminating in 2002, our property was part of larger zoning issues involving 7 of 13 properties that were incorrectly zoned as shoreland and resource protection. Some of the properties were rezoned for development, like those behind the Harpswell Neck Post Office, while others, including ours, were not addressed despite repeated requests. For reference, our property has never abutted the shore, despite claims from then Land Use Committee and some selected conversations with DEP determined that our property did not meet the criteria for significant wetland. The property was removed in 2002 or thereabouts from resource protection based on those findings and discussions. In 2006, FEMA maps inaccurately placed our property in a flood zone, resulting in a cancellation notice from our insurance company. A review confirmed that the property is on the inland side of Cranberry Mountain. It's not within 250 feet of any water body. It is not located in a floodplain. The current issues. Sorry, can't turn the page.
Take your time.
So, the town is now merging previously separated wetlands into a single significant wetland designation and using the FEMA floodplain insurance rate map for firms to justify these changes. In the January 14th memo from the Planning Board states that these updates are based on outcomes of FEMA firms, which provide far more precise flood maps than the previous versions from the 1980s. However, FEMA explicitly states that these maps should not be used for zoning or wetland delineation. Their intended purpose is insurance risk assessment and not land use regulation. The source, FEMA floodplain mapping guidance. Key concerns. The proposed zoning map is a visualization with no defined property boundaries. In this, the proposed map does not include tax map boundaries, make it impossible for landowners to determine how changes affect their specific properties. This means that landowners cannot verify their zoning status, which raises concerns about arbitrary enforcement and future disputes. We've been told the maps are overlaid for visualization purposes, so how can property owners assess the impact of these changes when the proposed map does not include tax boundaries or coordinates? What official documentation will be provided to show property level changes? 2. Harpswell's tax maps are known to be inaccurate. It's widely acknowledged that Harpswell's tax maps do not align with property surveys. If the town overlaid GIS data on these already flawed maps, they have no reliable baseline for making zoning decisions. Given that Harpswell's tax maps are known to be inaccurate, what verification process was used to ensure that the GIS overlays are aligned with actual surveyed properties? 3. GIS is only as accurate as the data it's based on. GIS is a powerful tool, but its accuracy depends on the quality of the underlying data. If FEMA maps, historic overlays, and tax maps are incorrect, GIS-generated zoning maps are also flawed. Did the town conduct physical verification or field verification on all of the impacted sites before applying these zoning updates? Or are these changes purely based on GIS overlays?
I can answer that question right now.
Can I keep going now? We can circle back. That would be perfect.
You almost
Are we
finished?
I have a right to be heard.
You absolutely
Okay,
do, and you're also welcome to submit your testimony.
Are we truly
can
being
read it.
asked to approve zoning framework built on unverified, incomplete, or FEMA data marked not to be used for zoning or wetland delineation? Or potential legal and property value implications. If the town's imposing new restrictions based on inaccurate mapping, property owners could face unjustified property use restrictions, difficulty securing loans or insurance due to incorrect zoning classifications, unfair and incalculable loss of property value due to misaligned regulations. Bad data leads to bad zoning decisions. The town must ensure that the property owners receive a clear, precise, and verifiable zoning determination before implementing any new restrictions with transparency and accuracy. So I'm probably the one you were talking about before when you mentioned in your opening statements. So here are other statements that have come from the town office and why they don't all hold up. We are following state mandates. The mandatory Shoreland Zoning Act applies only within 250 feet of water bodies. If the town's expanding regulations beyond this, They're choosing to do so and not following a state requirement. The new FEMA maps are more precise, too. The precise floodplain data does not equal wetland data. Those are two separate regulatory categories. 3, the upland zoning map clarifies boundaries. Clarification should not mean expanding regulations on land that was previously reviewed and deemed non-significant. If boundaries are changed, where's the sort of supporting ecological data? And 4, we are only updating red line document to be consistent with ordinance already approved. So over the years, the town has piecemealed some zoning regulations together without aligning this key documentation, my understanding, resulting in a murky, inconsistent regulatory framework.
Ma'am, I'm going to give you another minute, and then I'm going to ask you to just submit. Okay, that's great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So, by failing to update and synchronize the ordinances properly, the town itself created confusion, now using that confusion to justify sweeping zoning to create these significant wetlands and making them appear that they are now contiguous wetlands rather than the insignificant, small, piecemeal wetlands that they were. If these changes are truly just administrative, then why are they fundamentally altering property designations and imposing new stringent regulations? Closing statement. You'll be happy. Throughout the years, and most recently, we've sought to clarify these zoning changes, only to be met with misinformation, contradictory explanations, and in some cases, outright refusal to engage. When public officials tasked with implementing these regulations cannot or will not answer fundamental questions, dismiss concerns outright, and shut down conversations rather than address them, that is not due process, that's obstruction. Public participation in zoning decisions is not a courtesy, it's a requirement. And yet, when those of us who stand to lose the most ask for transparency, we're met with silence, misinformation, or worse, the suggestion that we have no right to question the decisions made about our own property. That's unacceptable. At the heart of responsible governance is transparency and accountability, yet what we see here is a pattern that relies on outdated and flawed, incomplete data. I can stop right there. I think you've got my point.
I am in charge of this meeting, so thank you very much. Really appreciate it. You asked a lot of questions and made a lot of statements, and we'll do our very best to answer your questions. And you're welcome to come in, and I will be there when you meet with the town staff, and we'll have a discussion. We'll have a sign-up sheet, and you're welcome to sign it.
I'm Mary Ann Leaf on the Conservation Commission, and I just wanted to say something regarding the wetland study that was done in 1990, I believe, at which time there were 28 wetlands that were met. Land truth done by the alternatives. These 28 wetlands, I believe, are in our ordinance now, and they were not all coastal wetlands, even though most of our wetlands in town are coastal. But there were a number that are freshwater wetlands, and I believe that the ones that have come up tonight are 3 of those that were freshwater wetlands that had their own habitat protections needed, and the rain brought up tonight. But they weren't, it's a little bit in talking about whether it's freshwater wetland or a shoreline wetland. But we could talk more about that and the reason why we want something as resource protection. It's not really, it does affect what you can build on, but it's also there to help the environment itself and protect what is the runoff into the streams. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else want to share any comments? I want to thank everybody for coming tonight again. We don't always agree, but we do need to listen to each other, and so we'll offer an opportunity to do more listening and make changes that need to be made. So we'll see you again for sure.
Okay, I think it's been suggested generally, but I want to make sure that everyone is clear that these maps are guidelines for you to follow. And the thing that we've never had before is a map that you could go to and say, you know what, my property may potentially have a problem. Now we have that as a quick guide, but as was mentioned earlier, what this is a guideline. It says, you know what, maybe I'm in resource protection, maybe it's a fuzzy line and it isn't. That's always something that you can come in and talk to the people in the codes office and to Margaret about, or to us as well. And that's the whole reason why we have the public hearing, is so that you have an opportunity to give us ideas about what you're thinking and what your concerns are, so that we can further address them.
Thank you, Dan. Yes, sir.
I just want to clear, there's still some more items on the agenda here, the ordinance changes.
Yes, we will probably be going through those. I sort of felt like we addressed some of them right up front, but we can certainly go through and, are you asking us to specifically go through the ordinance and go through each one? Because we will.
Certainly are.
Okay, then we'll do
I have a
it.
couple concerns, mostly drafting.
Absolutely.
And I'm happy to work in private.
Okay.
Rather than the board over here with minutia.
Well, maybe we can get through it, so, and everybody might be interested in hearing it, so let's start out.
I'll start with that point of the agenda. The biggest concern I have is.
Yeah, can you move closer to the mic, because we're having a little bit.
The biggest concern that initially caught my attention was the change to using the upland edge of the wetland as the criteria for defining. There's lots of stuff in the ordinance. And the change, what concerns me is that previously we're using the highest annual tide, and this change to the upland edge of the wetland invokes that definition. And the biggest problem I see with that is that it uses the term and/or, which I hate. Use the term and/or in the middle of the definition, and to quote what the Maine legislature's drafting policy is, it says and or. Never use and or. It's just completely ambiguous. And or two completely different words, completely different meanings. And if you read the definition, the upland edge of a wetland, it says the boundary between upland and wetland. For purposes of a coastal wetland, is more the boundary is the line formed by the landward limits of the salt tolerant vegetation and or the highest astronomical tide. So is it and or? Those are the sort of things.
Would you be willing to submit your comments to us in writing?
I certainly will.
Oh, thank you so much.
And I'd be willing to sit down with you too. I mean, there are some other things as well that I'm concerned with.
That language is straight out of the DEP
I know.
mandatory.
I know. So I went and found the model ordinance, and it's peppered with and/ors.
Yeah.
And so is our definitions of that.
Yeah, if you have suggestions, we're happy to hear it. Howard on the board is usually our definitions guy, but he's not here tonight.
Okay.
So I feel like you guys can really get on the same page about this.
My suggestion is to deal with these as they come up.
Yeah.
I think it's practical to go through the whole definition and we'll change every one, helter skelter. But I think when one of these comes up for revision, it's time to look at it and then revise it. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
I don't want to keep everybody here, but as Ned was saying, the subjectivity of the upland edge of a wetland has always been a problem. One person's opinion hardly ever matches another as to where that is exactly on the land. And the lady from Birch Island brought up a couple other things in my mind. There are many reasons why a piece of property may be an RP or not, and such as the ability to locate a septic system, such as the inability to locate a structure that meet the setback requirements, and many more. So just because you're in a zone or turn out to be in a zone that you don't like, you should go to the town office and talk it over and find out what the exact reasons for that designation are. If you agree with them, that's fine. If you don't, you probably need to argue.
Thank you, Sam. As long as we can hear you, yeah.
I can be loud. I was just scanning through this real quick. Do you have a date that you expect this to go in front of the town council?
It will be at town meeting. It will be on the warrant for town meeting. And if we have your name, and so if you sign up, we'll let you know, we'll be meeting with you. We'll let you know what we're doing exactly. So when you come to the town meeting, we probably won't have another public hearing. But we will, for those of you who have taken the time to come, we will be in touch with you and we will communicate with you exactly what we're doing with your comments, so you'll know.
But you don't have one set already for this on the agenda?
For town meeting?
Yes.
So the process for this will be whatever's approved tonight will go in front of the select board. That ideally was scheduled for I think the 7th. They meet on Thursdays, sometimes every Thursday, sometimes every other Thursday. Ideally, if something gets passed tonight, it will go on the agenda for the select board on the 7th, and they will they'll approve it to get it put on the warrant for town meeting, which, I don't know if David knows the exact date. March 8th. Oh, March 8th, yeah.
Give the select board a public.
Absolutely.
And also just to help clarify, all these meetings are taped, so they are fully live, so you can find them online too. Because I know a lot of people can't make it, but at least you can pull it up and follow what happened. So everything is taped and open to the public.
Also see them on television.
All right, I want to thank you for coming. The planning board now has to decide what we want to do. And then we also have a planner's update. So I would like to open the meeting up for discussion by planning board members about how to proceed from here. So what Lori has said, since you probably couldn't hear us, no, whether or not we could meet with folks and then have another public hearing, and which is what I would like to do. And I wonder if we have time to do that. Okay, that's not good enough. I wish it was.
The answer, the long answer is, according to Terry Gaudette, the deputy town administrator, to get it printed in the town report, we have to have it in the next week or two. If changes can be made up to a couple weeks before town meeting, it just wouldn't get put into the town report. That's all.
Thank you very much. My feeling is that we need to have another public hearing. And so I would suggest that we table taking any action on this until we can meet with folks individually or together, and then present what changes are made as a result of the comments at this hearing. If it doesn't get into the town report exactly as it needs to be, then we'll have copies for people at the town meeting so you can get the final draft. But I think the most important thing is for us to hear your comments and then respond to your comments and let you know what we're doing. So that's my take on it, and I'd be happy to take a vote. All right, so I'll move that we'll table this taking any action on the agenda item until we have a chance to meet with folks, which will be pretty soon, and then schedule another public hearing. Second? Okay, second by Courtney, all in favor? Fine, thank you very much. It does put a constraint on us, and it's not your fault by any means. It's also not the planning board's fault. It's no one's fault. But to schedule a public hearing and then expect that the public hearing is going to get no feedback that would change the action that we might take is, it kind of paints us into a corner, which isn't the best way to do business. So we will let you know when the next public hearing is. It'll be soon. So please submit all of your commentary and make sure that you sign the sign-up form. And is there any update from the planner?
Not anymore.
I just want to thank Margaret once again for stepping up to the plate and really filling in the shoes of the planner's position. She's done a really good job, and we're lucky to have her.
Maybe I would just say, I appreciate my mom coming tonight to my very first planning board official meeting.
That was very cute.
This is, I think, one of the first times that the planner has actually been a Harpswell resident, and it's so nice to have that. So, all right, this meeting is adjourned.
And you guys can put your email address over next to your name on the sign-in sheet, and I will get everybody updated.